Okay, so this is the financial focus segment of our weekly webinar. If you're just joining us in this segment, hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. But we're going to talk about what you should be doing 2 years from retirement, regardless of what that age is for you. But specifically, there may be things if you're 60 and you're 2 years out, or you're 63 and 2 years out, there might be some things specifically for you to do, and I'm going to touch on that. But there are some things you should focus on 2 years out from retirement. So I'm going to share my whiteboard. I'm going to pull up the whiteboard that I've been using over the past couple weeks, and we've added to this because one of the first things I want you to do, if you haven't watched the previous videos, 55 years old, what you should be doing now. 5 years from retirement, what you should be doing now. Go back and watch those. If you can finish watching this one too, that's fine. But if you haven't watched those, go back and watch them. I'm going to do a quick recap of some of those items because the things I focus on today are the focus items at 2 years out. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't worry about the other things that we talked about, but watch those previous videos. You want to, of course, pay attention to details. You want to pay attention to your expenses. You want to pay attention to your investments, your contributions to your retirement accounts, your taxable accounts. If you have a cash value of life insurance, those contributions, your 401ks, if you have a Roth 401k at work, get an answer about that. Many people still don't know if they have this opportunity to invest in a Roth 401k at work and if it makes sense for them. Depending on your income, it may make sense, it may not make sense, but that's a decision decision point for you with this planning. So contributions should be automated also. So pay attention to these things. There's those tax categories. Where do your investments lie in these tax categories? Remember, you've got your taxable bucket, your tax deferred bucket, your tax advantage bucket. And what sits in these tax advantage buckets are Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, and some properly structured cash value life insurance policies, or what my friend David McKnight calls life insurance retirement plans. So you've got to know where your funds sit in these tax categories: taxable, tax deferred, tax advantage. If they're in the wrong buckets, it could cost you millions of dollars over your lifetime or years of enjoyment of your retirement funds. So make sure that you understand that. I'm going through these quickly, but these are covered in more details in prior videos. Make sure your team is together. Your certified financial planner, your CPA, your attorney, make sure this team is together and make sure this team is working together for you. If you don't already have this put together at 2 years out, now is the time. Now is the time to start getting these people together for you. Develop your financial plan. Again, if you haven't done this already, boy, you got to do it now. It's time to sit down with a planner you trust, a competent, educated, proficient planner who's going to do a full financial plan for you and get that financial plan done. Truly comprehensive plan, and review that annually. Get that financial plan together. And again, I talk about the details in previous videos. So here's what we talked about 5 years from retirement from the last video. If you're 60, start looking at Social Security options. That is maximizing your benefits. Do I collect at 62, 67, 70 years old, or somewhere in between? Take a look at your cash flow, your expenses, how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out, how much money you can set aside, how much money you're going to need in retirement for your living expenses, for your aspirational expenses, for things that you're going to need to do. That's 5 years out. Do Roth conversions make sense for you? Should you be moving things from this bucket to this bucket via Roth conversion? I'm going to talk a lot on a podcast I'm doing with David McKnight today about Roth conversions, and I call them a gift from the IRS because Roth conversions there's no speed limits on Roth conversions. You can convert as much or as little as you'd like. All you have to worry about is the tax on that conversion, and that's a big thing, right? Paying a tax now is a big expense, and it's something to be considered and properly calculated, but this may be something that you want to consider. And 5 years out, is much better than doing it the day you retire or 5 years after you retire. So again, 5 years from retirement focus, we talked about last week, looking at Social Security, maximizing those benefits, looking at your cash flow, paying attention to tax and your tax category. Do Roth conversions make sense? Learn about this Aunt Irma you have, because you might be in a position where you're paying more for your Medicare benefits than you may realize. And I started introducing at the last video the account segmentation strategy, and we're going to talk a bit more about this today. I'm not going to go over every detail. This is the strategy in a nutshell. It is, instead of having one big portfolio that's designed to fund 35, 40 years of your retirement life, you break it down into smaller portfolios that are designed to fund different segments of time in your lifetime. These 0 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, 10 to 13, they're years. So you have to figure out how much money you need for each one of those segments, and then you invest your money appropriately, more conservative in these early segments, more aggressive in these later segments when you can afford to have that volatility. So we're going to come back to that, but start paying attention to these investment strategies like account segmentations. And folks, if you have questions about this, I know this gets really complex, as does the Roth conversion and tax efficient planning strategies, but you can reach out to us at questions@attleborowealth.com. That's questions@attleborowealth.com. And if you want to schedule a 15-minute consultation call with me, you can do so at the link in the description here. All right, now we're going to talk about 2 years retirement focus. So here's where we are today. So depending on your age, start planning your Social Security claiming strategies. So if you're 55 and you're 2 years from retirement, this isn't your time for that. But if you're 60, start having this conversation. So depending on age, start planning your Social Security claiming strategies. This is an area where you can get down a terrible rabbit hole on YouTube. There are, one of the videos I did about 6 months ago was with this fellow, Sarasota Tim, who said, I collected at 62 and you should too. Well, that's horrible advice. It may be great for him, but there are, first of all, his math is wrong with many parts of his videos, but even if it's 100% right for him, it doesn't mean it's right for you. Social Security is very complex. You have a very limited window to be able to fix any mistakes when it comes to Social Security claiming strategies. And it really, the wrong claiming strategy could affect you negatively for the rest of your life. So it's really important. It's so important that we hired an expert on our team. You've all heard about Heather Schreiber. Heather Schreiber is one of the top Social Security analysts in the country, and she works closely with our team and reviews every one of our clients' Social Security claiming strategies. But if you're 2 years from retirement, unless you're very young, you want to start having this discussion about Social Security claiming strategies. So depending on age, also consider healthcare costs. So you might be 63 years old, for example. You're 2 years out from your retirement, and it lines up nicely with being 65 and being able to collect your Medicare benefits. There are things, of course, you have to pay attention to that, and that is, back to that Aunt Irma that you have. So IRMA is income-related monthly adjustment amount. It's the additional surcharge that you may have to pay if you make what the government deems too much money, and this can be hundreds of dollars a month. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when we're talking about IRMA strategies, I just happen to have a video about IRMA. We'll put the link in the description of this video. But depending on your age, consider those healthcare costs, because if you're way before or any time before your Medicare claiming age, you've got to consider the cost of premiums. So it could be $1,500. It could be $1,200. It could be more depending on your health and your needs. and the number of people that you have to cover. You could be retiring and you have your spouse on your policy, and now that person has to get coverage as well. That could be significantly more money than you may be considering. So if you're retiring prior to Medicare collection age 65 typically for most people, then consider the cost of the premiums you may have for healthcare costs. Zero in on your goals, needs, and objectives. Very few people really have this conversation. Even folks who have their detailed spreadsheets of their expenses, that's great. Very few people really have the conversation, well, geez, I'd like to travel, and this is what it's going to cost. There are other things I'd like to do. I want to buy that RV, drive around the country, whatever your goals and objectives are. Remember, we have living expenses, and then we have aspirational expenses. You've got to really start zeroing in on these goals, needs, and objectives and get clear about your expenses now, 2 years out. Because if you wait till you're much closer, and it gets more difficult to make adjustments as you get closer. Not that you can't do it, but it gets more difficult. If you wait until you're just ready to retire, you might end up delaying your retirement or not having the type of retirement that you may want, certainly early on in your retirement life. So zero in on those goals, needs, and objectives. And again, there are things that you just might not be considering. Taxes on Social Security. Do you know that your Social Security can be subject to tax? Up to 85% of your benefit can be subject to tax. That could affect your lifestyle. If you're expecting $3,000 a month and suddenly it's $3,000 a month less tax, well, then you may have to either adjust your spending or come up with a different strategy. And there are strategies to help lessen or avoid that, but you can't do it at the last minute, or it's harder at the last minute. So zero in on those goals, needs, and objectives. Get clear about your expenses. Again, living expenses. So this is the time. If you don't have a program, reach out to us again at questions@attleborowealth.com. That's questions@attleborowealth.com. We have a spreadsheet we've put together that helps identify expenses. There are categories in that spreadsheet that you may not be considering. I'm happy to share it with you. Just send us an email. But you want to get a handle on those living expenses. So these living expenses are things that you're going to need to just get by, right? Your food, your housing, your internet bill. I know that's a standard expense. Probably your cell phone, things that you need to get through your life. It isn't always the travel and the other things that you want to do. First, get a handle on those basic living expenses. Make sense? Then you have those aspirational expenses. Here's where you layer in, well, geez, I'd like to spend $10,000 a year traveling in my first several years of retirement. Identify what that is. Don't worry about the inflation number, because if you're working with a qualified financial planner, they should be able to push out those inflation numbers or calculate those inflation numbers for you, because we know that the cost of a $10,000 vacation today is going to be much different in 5 years or 10 years. The cost of just basic goods or services are going to be more expensive in the future, but that can become overwhelming for people. Well, geez, I know it's going to cost me $10,000 a month today or $5,000 a month today, but what's that going to look like in the future? So don't let that stymie you. This is why I say this, because you can really get stuck in trying to figure out those future needs. It's not that they shouldn't be calculated, but there's decent programs out there, I'm sure, that can also calculate these things for you. And if you're good with spreadsheets, you could put a simple increase in your expenses, whether they're living expenses, aspirational expenses. But identify at least what they are today and really zero in on that. But don't forget the other things. So here are things that people forget. They'll say, okay, this is what I need. I'm just going to give you a number, $5,000 a month. They're my basic living expenses. Now I'd also like to spend $10,000 a year during retirement on travel for probably the first 5 years. And as we dig in, we say, okay, well, how old's your car? Do you think that you're going to need to replace your car during your retirement lifetime? Well, sure. My car is about 5 years old. You know, I keep my cars for a long period of time, and this one's about 5 years old, so I'll probably have it another 5 years, but then I'm going to need a new one. Well, folks, I don't know if you bought a car recently, but it's really hard to buy a car under $35,000, $40,000, and that's kind of a basic car. So you can easily get up to $50,000 for a decent car. So you've got to add that in, and then. Okay, well, tell me about where you're living. Well, geez, you know, the house we're living in, we may need a new roof, and we may need a new heating system, and you know, my spouse would really like to redo the kitchen, and if we sell it, there are definitely things that we're going to have to do. So all those things, also think about that. So now you have a new car, or at least one new car. If there's a spouse involved, there might be two new cars. You've got maybe $100,000 or more, several $100,000 in renovations that you might want to do or need to do to your home before you move on. And then there's also this potential downsizing or resizing or just trading in one house for another. And that can be very complex and very impactful to a plan, either very positively or very negatively. But these things all have to be fleshed out. Folks, 2 years out is a really good time to be having these discussions because it allows you to plan for things that you want to do and things that you need to do. 5 years out is good too. 2 years out is really the time to sharpen it. On our next webinar, we're going to talk about 1 year out. That's even a deeper sharpen. But 2 years is a really good timeline to really sharpen those goals, needs, and objectives, and expenses and things that you just might not be considering. So living expenses, aspirational expenses, taxes. Not enough people are talking about taxes, the cost of taxes. When you talk about $10,000 a month, $5,000 a month that what we need to spend, whatever your number is, that's an after-tax number. Few people say, well, geez, I want to spend $12,250 because I know that a month because I know I've got to allow for a tax payment. I can't think of a person who's actually come to me with that without calculation. This is what I need to spend. That's the net number after tax. And depending on where you live, you have state tax and you have federal tax. And we all know, all of us sitting here know that taxes are likely going to be much higher within the next 6 or 7 years than they are now. So not only are folks missing the potential cost of tax in retirement, they're also certainly missing the potential cost of rising taxes in retirement. So sharpen your skills on that too. Now, there are some very good resources for that. I'm going to be sharing, or I'm going to be on a guest on a podcast at 1 o'clock today with a fellow named David McKnight. David McKnight wrote a book called The Power of Zero. I'll put a plug in for David McKnight and The Power of Zero. I'm going to write it right here. Power of Zero. The Power of Zero. If you haven't read that book, go to Amazon, order that book, and that will help sharpen your skills when it comes to preparing yourself for paying taxes in retirement. So this 2-year mark is really about focus and sharpening. If you're a client of ours and if you haven't read The Power of Zero and you want a copy of it, reach out to us and we'll send you a copy. All right, so be clear about your expenses. Living expenses, aspirational expenses, and taxes, exclamation point. Both current and future. Focus on segment 1 and 2 of your investment strategy. So back to this segmentation strategy. Now, I know there's a lot going on, and you should go back to the previous video, what should you be doing 5 years out from your retirement, so you can see the discussion about this more. But when I'm talking about segment 1 and segment 2, I'm talking about this area right here. Why is this important? Well, first you have to identify how much money you're going to need in years 0 to 3 of your retirement and years 4 to 6 of your retirement. So you identify the dollar amounts that you're going to need. Let me change my pen color because it might just be clearer for everybody. So 0 to 3 years and 4 to 6 years. All these other years are important as well, and they should be invested appropriately. But certainly, if you're 2 years prior to retirement, tick these out. Minus 1 year, minus 2 years. You want to make sure that you've got your funding together for those first 3 years, because you know the risk of if the market drops dramatically and you're pulling funds out in early retirement, that it can be devastating to your retirement. So you want to set yourself up to help avoid that. And one of the ways that you set yourself up to help avoid that is figure out how much money you're going to need in those first 3 years and put it into something very conservative and very safe. Now, fortunately, right now, we have a lot of great options for that segment 1 type of portfolio. It could be CDs, money markets. We're getting good interest rates for now. Once interest rate cuts start to happen, we're going to see those interest rates go down. But you want to zero in on these 0 to 3 and 4 to 6 first 2 segments, segment 1, segment 2. This portfolio should have very, very little or no risk. These are funds that you're going to need in the first 3 years of your retirement, first 3 to 4 years of your retirement. If the market drops 40%, do you want this money at risk? Well, the answer is no. You don't want that money at risk. This next segment, years 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, depending on your plan, all this information gets, how do we figure out what fits in these boxes? It's driven by the financial plan. Well, the next segment of years, 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, if that's for you, that should go into a slightly more aggressive portfolio, but still not overly aggressive, because that's going to fund your next year's 4 to 6 or 5 to 7. And we cascade those down. So as you spend this money, 0 to 3, this 4 to 6 takes its place, gets reallocated into a more conservative portfolio, and it all cascades down like that. So I want you to focus on, if you're 2 years from retirement, I really want you to focus on making sure that you at least have that set up. You should, of course, have the rest of it set up, but just from experience, people get sloppy with the segment 1 and segment 2. They say, oh, I know I have to do that, but geez, my portfolio is really doing great right now, and I don't want to rebalance it into the planned segmentation. So you get on that pendulum of fear and greed, and a lot of folks are on that greed side. And when the market comes clapping down, it's going to hit those folks the pendulum is way over here. It's going to hit them the most, and that could dramatically change the trajectory of your retirement. So I want you to focus on, certainly have that whole segmentation strategy planned out, but I want you to zero in on and focus on at least segment 1 and segment 2. Focus on segment 1 and segment 2 of your investment strategy. Ensure your beneficiaries. No, that's beneficiaries. There's no spell check on this program, so my apologies there. But ensure your beneficiaries are correct and up to date. Review your financial plan, your cash flow, your goals, needs, and objectives, your potential issues, tax planning. In that financial plan, are Roth conversions right for you? Life insurance, is that right for you? That tax advantage funding of a properly structured life insurance policy. Sometimes there's long-term care benefits, and of course a life insurance benefit. So is that right for you? Should that be part of your plan? Much easier early on in this 2-year window. If you're prior to age 60, do you think it's easier if life insurance for you to get life insurance than after age 60? Yeah, it's probably easier depending on your health, and probably less costly. Long-term care coverage, your investment strategy, your estate plan. You want to tighten up, and you want to really pay attention to all these things as you're leading into your retirement. Sure, of course you should have been doing this 10 years ago, and hopefully you did. But if you're just jumping in now, if it's 2 years to retirement and you're just jumping in now, go back, look at the prior videos, focus on these items that I talked about today. Make sure that you go through and you learn all about the other things, the 5-year focus, the putting your retirement team together, paying attention to the details. Do all that too. If you do these things, you're going to have a better opportunity to be prepared for your retirement. It's going to feel much better rolling into your retirement 2 years from now, rather than ending up there bang, if retirement is 65 years old, now I'm suddenly 65 years old. So many things get in the way, your job, maybe your kids, caring for your family, maybe even your pets. There's a lot of things that get in the way. And maybe you didn't do the planning that you needed to do. But even if you did, it's time to really focus in and sharpen it. And that 2-year window is a good time for that. All right. So that's our webinar for today. I hope that was all helpful. Again, no webinar next week. The following week, we're going to talk about 1 year from retirement, what you should be doing just 1 year from retirement. And that's exciting. First of all, you should be planning your retirement party. But beyond that, there are other things you should be doing. I hope that was all helpful today. Love to hear some feedback from you. I hope you all have a great week. Take care.